miss her. Gee, what a thrill each time I kiss her. Believe me, I've got a case it's summer, and summer could take a few lessons from her. Picture a tomboy in lace. That's Nancy with a laughing face. Did you ever hear mission bells ringing? Well, she'll give you the very same drone. When she speaks, you would think it was singing. Just hear her say hello. I swear to goodness, you can't resist her. Sorry for you, she has no sisters. No angel could replace Nancy with the laughing face.
May this sanctuary be filled with a kind of celebration today. For thousands of years, people have gathered under a grove of trees or in the sacred house under an expansive sky or in the comfort of a small chapel to give thanks to God for the gift of life and the promise of life beyond the edge of this life. For thousands of years, people have been called together to holy places to say goodbye, to name what is beautiful and sacred, to celebrate life, and to remember a life well lived. For thousands of years, people have risked a catch in their throat, a quickening heart, a dampening eye, to be a witness to the presence of God at the sacred boundary between life and death. And so today we have gathered. Let us gather in hope and in celebration of the life of Nancy Petrie. Amen.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Catherine Petrie, and Nancy is my half-sister. However, the half never really applied to us. She was always just my sister. In her honor, I'd like to read a poem brought to my attention by our wonderful aunt, Helen Bryan. It's called The Ship. I am standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the morning breeze and departs for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength, and I stand and watch her until at last she is only a ribbon of white cloud, just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "There, she's gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight. That's all. She is just as large in mast and hull and spar as she was when she left my side, and just as able to bear her load of living freight to the place of her destination. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone at my side says, "There, she's gone," there are other eyes watching her coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "Here she comes." Thank you.
that we dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Troubles melt like lemon drops. You'll find me somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? Someday I'll wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me. Troubles melt like lemon drops on the chimney tops. That's where find me somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I?
When you see your child lying in a coffin, you can't stand it. Nancy Petrie was a warm and loving person. She was smart and funny and creative. She had more jobs than anyone I ever have known, was always there on time and ready to work, and she never did meet a checkbook she wanted to balance. Nancy always thought of others. She wanted to help people realize their dreams. When her husband wanted to leave his family business in Iowa, buy a boat to sail to the Virgin Islands, and own a boatyard, Nancy made sure the dream was fulfilled. When her daughter saw her brother bullied and threatened at Lancaster High School because he was smart and competent, she told her mother she wanted to move to Charlottesville with her mother and go to high school there. Nancy hired a lawyer to sort out the legalities. This tough, crusty lawyer called Nancy later and told her that he had dealt with many mothers in his career, but she was exceptional in dealing with understanding her child, supporting her child, and being an appropriate mother. She was all those and more. However, there was a group that enabled Nancy. The Campbell Memorial Presbyterian Church in Weems, Virginia, helped Nancy realize her dream. A very generous member, Jack Gilmore, rented his home to Nancy at a rate she could afford so she could nurture and raise her children without disrupting their lives as much as possible. Nancy's mother, me, did not approve of Barbie. So during that time in Kilmarnock, Nancy created magnificent Barbie birthday cakes for Libby's birthdays. It was the talk of the community. It gave me great joy to be with Nancy when Sam and Libby passed milestones in their lives. She would beam with pride and say, "That's my girl, that's my boy." Nancy loved the ocean, cats, her family and friends, and driving her car everywhere to visit longtime friends. She also knew and loved her older sister, Holly, very well. One typical spring Chicago day that was gloomy and awful, Holly came down the back stairs to the kitchen at 1122 Lake Avenue with the most miserable look on her face, and her ever-helpful mother said, "Holly, life is just a bowl of cherries." And Nancy said, "Mom, today, for Holly, life is just a bowl of bruised bananas." She was right. She also knew how to get under Holly's skin. One summer, when Holly was in college, she had 2 suitors. One young man painted our garage slowly and meticulously and inexpensively. Stan was very pleased about that. Every night, Nancy would sit on the living room sofa and practice her guitar, singing, "Torn between 2 lovers, nothing left to do." Holly loved it. The last time we saw her, she came to help Stan and me pack up 1122 Lake Avenue. That was my last hug from Nancy. One of her last trips was in December to visit her granddaughter, Charlotte Grace Horbley, near Pensacola, Florida. Nancy always noticed what special treat the people she loved enjoyed. Black licorice and Watley's peanut brittle for me, Virginia peanuts and Virginia candy-coated peanuts for Stan. Her treats arrived to our home just before Christmas. She told me in December that she had perfected some special cookies and cakes that her son-in-law, Andrew Horbley, really liked. She wanted to make sure she would always be welcome to visit Charlotte Grace. As one of her oldest friends, Becky Lloyd Wanberg, put in her note to us, she was such a long-time and loyal friend. She baked me a cake for my 16th birthday. We shared the role of Little Mary Sunshine at New Trier. She had such a bright, smiling spirit that will stay with me forever. I'm so happy to have had her for 60 and a half years. I know she loved me very much, and I loved her. Nancy drew a picture of herself, I don't know, in 3rd or 4th grade, this little stick figure skipping along and surrounded by flowers and birds and butterflies. And the title was "Skipping Along as I Know I Am." And I hope, Nance, you're continuing to skip along as I know you should. We miss you.
Now, if Holly had let me skip the line, I'd be slightly less emotional. I'm Kathy Fuller, Nancy's cousin. We were born the same year, 2 months apart, and have known each other our whole lives. Although we grew up in different states, Nancy in Wilmette, outside of Chicago, and me in Arlington, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C., our families would come together for holidays and vacations and visits to our maternal grandparents in Lordship, Connecticut. As adults, we kept up through letters, long phone calls, and occasional visits to our respective towns and cities. We've marked milestones and shared our journeys as we navigated our teenage years and complicated family dynamics, the incredible roller coaster that is motherhood, our career challenges and triumphs, and most recently, the joy of becoming a grandparent for the very first time. Our mothers are sisters, with mine passing in 2004 at the age of 64 after suffering from early onset dementia for more than a decade. I tell you this because Nancy was one of the very few people who came around toward the end of her life. My mother had been a beautiful, vivacious woman before her decline with legions of friends, including some among the DC elite. But by the time she died, most everyone had receded from her life. Repulsed by the empty shell she had become, but not Nancy. She stayed close, checking in with me and my siblings and making the unpleasant trips to visit what was left of her aunt and to help carry us through the horror and the grief as she closed out her life. It wasn't easy for Nancy, and with 2 young kids to care for at home, it sure as heck wasn't convenient. That was Nancy, no matter how exhausted she was from the demands of her own life. Nancy showed up for the people she loved, whether to lend a sympathetic ear, brighten their day with a hilarious story, or to help do the dirty work, like sorting through my mother's belongings. With Nancy, I always knew I had someone out there rooting for me and who would be there for whatever I needed. Nancy was smart and kind and compassionate. She had a soft, lyrical, reassuring voice, a hearty, contagious laugh, a beautiful smile, and the most gorgeous, sparkling eyes. She could be extremely silly. When we were small, I remember us giggling as we took turns burping the alphabet into a cassette recorder. When the tape surfaced many years later, I sent it to her, and we laughed about it all over again. She could also be tough and weathered many storms in her life. She once lived on a sailboat with her then husband John and their dog for a year, during which time they sailed from Virginia to the Caribbean. Nancy was a survivor, a warrior. Later in life, she went back to school and became a nurse. To make ends meet, she worked long hours and traveled great distances for mediocre pay. She took on side jobs and even moonlighted for the Virginia Department of Corrections, caring for inmates. And these weren't country club white-collar prisoners. We're talking thugs, murderers, rapists, drug dealers. There, my badass cousin, Nurse Nancy, earned the respect of even the most hardened criminals. After being on her feet for 12-plus hour shifts, Nancy would then usually head to the pool, where she would swim lap after lap for her health and her sanity. A natural caregiver, she thrived in her profession. Her roommate Cam, who became her close friend after hiring Nancy years ago, told me she was recently nominated for the Daisy Award, a prestigious national award for excellence in nursing. Yeah, she was amazing and incredibly creative and resourceful. She was the mom who once made Libby a homemade Barbie cake, as her mom mentioned, with a real Barbie doll in the middle and the lavishly frosted cake forming a big bell-shaped ball gown. When our Irish grandmother passed, Nancy made glittery green pins in the shape of a clover with Anne Barry's face at the center for us all to wear at her interment, which in tribute to her heritage fell on St. Patty's Day. And when my grandson Nino was born in October, she made time to crochet and ship a beautiful baby blanket for him, even though she had her own hands full preparing for the birth of her own granddaughter. She loved her children fiercely and considered Sam and Libby to be her proudest achievements and most treasured relationships. The last trip she made was to Florida over the holidays to meet her beautiful new granddaughter, Charlotte. After she and I spoke for a long time about what a wonderful and loving visit she had with Libby and Andrew and Charlotte, I've never heard her so thoroughly content and at peace. Her kids were happy and successful in their lives, and she was loving her life in Richmond and excited to be starting a new job. Her only wish was that everyone could live closer. The last voicemail she left me ended with her typical sign-off. Just know I'm thinking about you. I love you lots. Since Nancy's passing, my mind has played this Maya Angelou quote on repeat. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Nancy always made me feel like I mattered, that my life and whatever happened within it was important and worth her inconvenience. I know that she did that for many of you. In honor of Nancy, let's all do our best to leave the world a little better for us having lived. And Nancy, just know I'm thinking about you. And I always will as I finish my journey without you by my side. I love you lots.
Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I want to thank all of Nancy's families for the opportunity to talk about my roommate, Nancy. When Holly asked me to speak today, I was immediately reminded of a story my priest told. His father-in-law informed him that he didn't want this priest to deliver a eulogy at his funeral. When he asked why, the man said, "I cannot bear the thought of you standing up there telling lies about me." So therefore, I'll tell you that Nancy was not disorganized. She simply had anti-systematic methodology disorder. I met Nancy when she came to work for my home care agency as a weekend on-call responder. I remember so well the night I had to call Nancy at 11 p.m. to tell her that I needed her to go into work to work the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. I obviously woke her up, yet she cheerfully responded, "Okay, I'll get up, get dressed, and I'll be right there." I so well remember hanging up the phone thinking something is wrong with that girl. So when Nancy moved from Richmond and then back, I offered her to stay at my home until she found an apartment. I lived alone in a 4-bedroom colonial home, and it suddenly became alive. She cooked, we talked, we played Rummy Cube, and we laughed constantly. After having Nancy in my home for only a week, I offered that she just move in permanently. So Nancy moved in, along with 2 cats and 4,180 boxes of craft materials. Sam and Libby, those boxes of crafts are calling your name. In the South, we followed that with "bless your heart." The decision to ask Nancy to move in my home was the best decision I ever made. Nancy loved to play Rummy Cube and would squeal with joy every time she won, which was constantly. I finally caught on to the nuances of the game and started to win. We didn't play much after that. Nancy's soul was that of a caretaker, so her nursing career was a perfect fit. After a few short months on the job, she was nominated for the Daisy Award, which is a very prestigious national award for nursing excellence. She was adored by her fellow nurses, and they all became part of the endless list of Nancy's friends. Surely Nancy's greatest accomplishments was raising her two children, Sam and Libby. She was blessed with the beautiful birth of her granddaughter, Charlotte Grace. Thankfully, she was able to spend time with Charlotte and Libby 2 months before her passing. I never saw Nancy so happy as she was after that trip. Nancy liked poetry, so I wanted to end with a poem that I think encapsulates Nancy so very well. It's called The Dash by Linda Ellis. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following dates with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they had spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved them knew what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters most is how we live in love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you would like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what is true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Nancy, your dash was one for the ages.
My sister Nancy, she loved music. Her lovely, clear voice was a constant in our home growing up. She could harmonize to anything. I, on the other hand, not so much. When we were little kids, we shared a room, and we got to take turns picking a record album to listen to before bed. My number one selection was Julie Andrews, singing The Hills Are Alive from The Sound of Music. Nancy's favorite? Alvin and the Chipmunk Christmas album. This was not a seasonal choice. This was a year-round and often daily request. Inspired by Alvin, she perfected a perfect imitation of his breakout solo, Me, I Want a Hula Hoop. I can't do it. My daughter Sophia has the gift, and my friend Rusty has the gift. Her imitation of Alvin was legendary among her friends and family. Her most recent musical foray was learning to play the ukulele, and she loved it. Hence, we had the ukulele at the service. I like to think that it was perhaps an homage to the famous Tiny Tim and his ukulele hit, Tiptoe Through the Tulips, introduced to us by our dad when we were kids. Nancy loved to create. Any medium was fair game for her creative eye. Paper, paint, crayon, chalk, paper mache, pine cones, clay, pipe cleaners, fabric, pumpkins, birthday cakes. Bright, bold, joyful, and humorous, her work was like folk art, including the bright and joyful kitchen runner she painted for my mom's kitchen, bursting with smiling and singing bumblebees, butterflies, and birdies. And just so you know, cookie replicas will be featured at our home later today during the open house. Little extra incentive. Our also very creative mom taught us both to sew when we were little. I sewed by the rules, using patterns and following instructions. Nancy's vision could never be captured in a pattern. She sewed an assortment of crazy stuffed monsters born from her imagination. And who could forget the 3-foot-high, hilarious, giant, gold-painted papier-mâché Easter bunny with enormous bulging eyes and pipe cleaner whiskers that Nancy and all of her nieces and nephews created together on the back porch of 1122 Lake Avenue many years ago. It appeared every Easter around my mom's fireplace. As you've heard from several, Nancy loved to laugh. From the first moment I can remember, she laughed, she giggled, she made silly faces and made other people laugh. And she had a unique way of finding humor in just about everything, including, as you heard earlier, her stint working a second job as a nurse at a state penitentiary in Virginia. She could have joined the stand-up comedy circuit with her hilarious Adventures in Jail. And her favorite phrase, "Life is just a bunch of bruised bananas," could always crack a smile. She seemed to know exactly when and how to generate laughter and joy wherever she went. Nancy loved the beach. It was her happy place. When we were little, we spent our summers here at the beach in Wilmette, and my mom always said, if you had a crabby, whiny kid, take him to the beach, and voila, instant happiness. And it turns out, as mothers often are, she was right. Later, we would visit relatives on the East Coast and experience the ocean, which we both adored. From Misquamicut State Beach to the Jersey Shore and a couple in between that I can't remember right now, we rode the waves until we were blue, swam through swarms of stinging jellyfish some years, emptied copious amounts of sand from our swimsuits, built drip castles, and buried each other up to our necks in the sand. Nancy loved helping other people, and she bestowed her care, concern, and generosity on pretty much everyone she met. She was a devoted daughter, a caring and supportive and hilariously funny sister. She was the loving, playful, and fun Aunt Nancy to her many nieces and nephews, a cherished granddaughter, niece and cousin, and a compassionate friend and listening ear for her family, so many friends, co-workers, and of course, the patients she served. Her empathy and compassion knew no limits. I will never forget how she flew to Chicago to help me when my newborn twins were critically ill. She went straight to the children's ward and she held them for hours and hours. And most of all, Nancy loved her children, Sam and Libby. And she was over the moon when her granddaughter Charlotte arrived last November. Nancy was meant to be a mom and a grandma. She adored children and delighted in every stage of their development. She celebrated their accomplishments, provided solace, guidance, and wisdom during challenging times, and encouraged and supported them both in every way she could. She was incredibly proud of the amazing adults they've become, and was so delighted when they both found love and happiness. Libby with Andrew, wherever you are, and Sam with Jill. And most of all, she would have loved to be here today. She was an inspiration to us all, and to me, an example of what love is all about. Thank you.
This room is clearly full of the kind of creative love that Nancy exhibited, what else would call a room to chime in on Over the Rainbow, just at the right moment. What a beautiful testimony to love. There's a kind of ease with which Sam and Libby described their mom to me, as if her love was so self-evident that only a few sparse words were needed. Kindness, selflessness, flexibility. There were hard days, yes, and just enough challenges, but never judgment, and always laughter, and always growth. A day with Mom was a bird song, a sunny day, never too serious, always lighthearted and open-hearted. And so ancient scriptures on love seem paramount to naming what is and has been and always will be sacred about Nancy Petrie. The ancient scriptures place a primacy on love. Love ascends all the way to the top of the list of our priorities on how to live. For some of you, the most sacred expression of love in your life is the kind of love that you saw in Nancy every day. God is love, and those who dwell in love dwell in God, says our ancient holy texts. God is love, and those who dwell in love dwell in God. Or maybe more precisely for us here in this place on this day, God is love, and those who dwell in the love Nancy offered dwell in the presence of God. Is it possible that Nancy's humor, her intellect, her sharp wit, her effervescent kindness is the very thing that reveals for you what is sacred about this life, what is holy, what is God adjacent? God is love, and those who dwell in love dwell in God. Love was Nancy's nature. Love was her work. Love was her laughter and creativity and compassion. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives, says Annie Dillard. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And Nancy spent her life in the unconditional love of motherhood and in the patient rooms of hospitals and correctional facilities. Not all angels have wings, they say. Not all angels have wings, but some wear scrubs. And that was Nancy. In fact, it's not every day that you meet someone who so tenderly and beautifully and wholeheartedly lived out the very love that Jesus tries to lure us toward. Jesus says, "I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was without clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." This is what heaven on earth is like, Jesus says. A kind of love in action. Nancy's love would give the very coat off her back. Love in action. A kind of love like Nancy's, where banana bread and strawberry jam are ready for those who are hungry. And if we're hungry, we stop to eat. And if we're thirsty, we stop for a drink. And if we're tired, we sit for a while. And if we are strangers, we reach out and greet one another. And all will be well along the way, because Nancy's is a flexible kind of love, a listening ear kind of love, a creative, unburdened kind of love. And her love holds even the very challenging parts of the love that Jesus calls us toward, the parts that some of us want to overlook. "I was sick and you visited me," said Jesus. "I was in prison and you came to me." Nancy's love led her to the very sick bed of the incarcerated, caring for those who experienced life in the mystery of misfortune and in the depths of trouble only seen in the criminal justice system. The strength of her care was to overlook the imperfection in order to treat not only the disease, not only the disorder, not only the unrest with compassion, but to see the wholeness of the person standing before her, and to let love win in the midst of a place where love is often so lacking. It's possible, and you know better than I do, that there were waters of chaos in Nancy's life, days when there was no light even by which to see the chaos. Maybe that's literally true, a sailor's life she led in her sailboat. Maybe she felt fair weather turn foul, the wind too strong, the waves too high, the weather too unpredictable. But also, maybe you know the everyday ways in which the chaos, the waters of chaos, brought heavy swell. Sometimes we search and search and search for what we cannot see, and still it stays dark and stormy. But the story you tell of Nancy, of your mother and your sister and your daughter, is a more even keel kind of story, where her love balanced the ship, where her love kept things stable, where her love assured smooth sailing. Not easy sailing, not trouble-free sailing, but a kind of love that persevered. Our ancient scriptures on love know this too. Nancy's love, a kind of love that is patient and kind, that does not envy and does not boast, a kind of love that honors others and is never self-seeking, a kind of love that is not easily angered and keeps no list of wrongs, a kind of love that rejoices, a kind of love that protects, a kind of love that hopes and perseveres, a kind of love that stands with you in the fray, a fierce friendship, motherhood hard-fought, long days encased in care and joy and a shared smile. Nancy is gone too soon. The world is upside down. Mothers burying daughters, granddaughters so fresh with so much love. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives, says Annie Dillard. A day with your mom became a lifetime of love. Another poet puts it another way. Because we are imperfect and love so deeply, we will never have enough days. We need the gift of starting over, beginning again, just this constant good, this saving hope. We will never have enough days, the poet declares, but we will always have enough love. Imperfect, yes, but enough. And it will be the constant good, the gift Nancy gives you day after day as you begin anew, afresh, her blue eyes, her bright smile, somehow still guiding you in the here and now on the path of love. Let us pray. Holy God, we find ourselves here today because we have taken on the unavoidable risk of loving deeply. And we bring before you Nancy Petrie, daughter and sister and mother and grandmother and friend and cousin, most beloved. Because we have known love for Nancy, we can open ourselves to your love so that your Spirit might form a song between us that can transcend, ascend, and cross the threshold between this life and the next, uniting us with those of every time and place. God, as you carry Nancy across the threshold of this life to the next, bind us to her and bind us to one another here, never leaving us abandoned. Let love resound. We give you thanks for that warm Chicago summer day when Nancy was born, and for the love that surrounded her from Chicago to Virginia and back again. Whether in Wilmette, Charlottesville, Virginia Beach, Richmond, Ocean Grove, on the beach, or in the sea amid the waves, there was a gravitational pull to her love, a purposeful lure which brought us closer to her. We give you thanks for the deep joy of long days and moonlit nights with Nancy, for her genuine care, for her unparalleled creativity, for her presence and openness and love. We give you thanks for her sense of adventure and her dogged determination, for her voice in song and her spark behind the ukulele, for every letter she wrote, for every phone call she made, for every flight she took to draw near to the ones she loved, for being the one she loved. Be with all who treasured Nancy, O God, especially with Sam and Jill, with Libby and Andrew, with her grandbaby, Charlotte Grace, love embodied, with Anne and Stan, with Jim and Janelle, with Holly and Ed, and James and Catherine and Carol Ann, with Greg and Michael and John and Cameron and Cindy, and an ever-widening circle of love. Set your love, God, deep within us so that the saints of light are always just a song away. Point the way home for Nancy and point the way ahead for us. Let us, in hope, imagine for Nancy only an expansive place of welcome, a house with many rooms, a banquet hall of tender reunion where even strangers become friends and the deepest, most trustworthy networks of friendship and love and care are made known in the mystery of life beyond life. From the dust you made us, O God, and to the dust we shall return. Give rest, O Christ, to your beloved Nancy, with all the saints, where there is neither pain nor sorrow, but only everlasting life, everlasting light, and everlasting song. Amen.
is Sam Friday.
And I'm Libby Horbally, and we are Nancy's children.
We sincerely thank you all for coming today to share your kindness and support. We are deeply touched by all the kindness we have received during this difficult time and appreciate all the thoughtful words that have been shared about our mom.
Our mom always appreciated quality time with the people in her life, and we know she would have been overjoyed that we were all able to spend this time together on her behalf. Thank you all for being here today to join us in the celebration of her life.
Nancy's family invite you to stay at the church after the benediction and the closing music for a time of celebration in the Culbertson room. You can find the Culbertson room through the double doors that are to your right. And then they invite you to an open house at Holly and Ed's house, and the address is on the back of the bulletin for you. After the benediction and the final piece of music, you have seen maybe this small bird here sitting on the altar, and that is the urn for Nancy. And so I will bring that to her mother, and then I will lead the family out to the Culbertson room for us to gather for a time together. So here our benediction, our spoken benediction, and then there will also be a beautiful sung benediction called Joy Overflow. Here our spoken benediction as you go out from this place to love and celebrate Nancy in friendship and in celebration, in fellowship and in the gentle rest of friendship. May you know the gift that she gave you. A love that is patient, a love that is kind, a love that honors others, a love that is never self-seeking, a love that delights in what is good and beautiful and true, a love that always protects, a love that always hopes, a love that always perseveres, a love that never fails. And now these three remain: faith and hope and love, but the greatest of these is love. Amen.
I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. I've come from a kingdom, a beautiful kingdom, where we laugh, 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 joy overflow. There is no sorrow, there is no weeping. We dance, 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 joy overflow. Oh, I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. Joy like a river, it's like a fountain. My life is sweeter, 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 joy overflow. I'm in heaven. heritage of God. Great peace is spoken over me. My life is greater, greater, greater joy overflow. Oh, I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. Oh, I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. Oh, I feel all right. Got the power and the spirit in my life. Oh, I feel all right. Got the power and the spirit in my life. 1, 2, 3, my life. Counting my blessings, name them one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4, I feel all right. Counting my blessings, name them one by one. Oh, joy overflow in my life. Oh, I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. I've got joy, 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 joy overflow in my life. Yes, I've got joy, 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 joy overflow.